Hey, here's a quick heads up before we dive in. You may hear me mention the Sparkler Society in this episode, talking about it like it's happening right now. And here's the truth. My ADHD brain got so excited about this community that I may have jumped a little bit enthusiastically. Okay, a lot enthusiastically before everything was actually ready. Classic ADHD move, right? We know what that's like. So here's what's actually happening. We've hit pause to make sure the Sparkler Society launches the right way, because this is going to change lives, and I want it to be everything you deserve from day one. We're officially launching in July of 2026, and here's what you can look forward to. Live group sessions every week, including support around decluttering and downsizing, body doubling, and ADHD group coaching. We are also addressing some of the big challenges of ADHD, worrying, overspending, and starting crafts only to lose steam. Membership in the Sparkler Society is going to save you from paying the ADHD tax. We're talking real dollars back in your pocket. And most importantly, we are building a community of women who want to get their shit together. Here's the exciting part. We're starting a wait list right now at jamieshapiro.me. That's JAMISHAPIRO.me. And the VIPs who join early will get free access to shape the community before we officially launch in July. You'll help us build this thing together. So if you hear me talking about the Sparkler Society like it's happening tomorrow, just know it's coming in July, and it's going to be worth the wait. Okay, let's get to today's episode. Hello. Today, we're diving into something that touches every single one of us, relationships. And not just any relationship, but how ADHD shows up in the partnerships we care about most. Our guest today is Anita Robertson, a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist who's become a leading voice in helping neurodiverse couples thrive. Anita specializes in relationship therapy, blending approaches like attachment therapy, emotional focus therapy, and Gottman therapy. But here's what makes her work truly special. She's taken these proven methods and made them ADHD friendly. And she didn't just do it from a textbook. Anita has ADHD herself, and that lived experience combined with her professional expertise led her to create the ADHD Relationship Bootcamp, a preventative program that gives couples the skills to communicate when you've got two differently wired brains trying to connect. After working with countless neurodiverse couples and seeing the same pain points surface again and again, Anita wrote the book literally. In 2020, In 2020, she published ADHD and Us, a couple's guide to loving and living with adult ADHD. Her mission? To help couples learn the skills early so they can prevent the frustration and hurt that so many face down the road. Beyond her relationship work, Anita is a passionate social justice advocate, fighting for everything from telehealth access to educational equity to LGBTQ rights. She brings that same commitment to understanding how systematic issues impact mental health into everything she does. So get ready for an honest, insightful conversation about love, ADHD, and building relationships that work for both partners. Whew, I'm out of breath from that. Thanks, Anita. I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I don't think I've told you this, but like the name of your podcast, I love because my grandma, obviously not diagnosed because, she passed away last year at 98 years old, but she is my favorite person in the whole world and such a pioneer. I think my life has been so much better because she definitely has like the amazing ADHD brain and just like pioneered so many things that work for ADHD that like I think impacted my life in a positive way and so many others. And so like I definitely have like a full-on obsession with my grandma. Still, so I just love the name of your podcast because there's probably still so many like younger people who are realizing, oh, if I have ADHD, oh, who else in my family, and kind of make sense of your life. So.
Sure. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And it's so funny because, and I, if you've never listened to my podcast before, I discovered that I had ADHD a little more than 10 years ago when my oldest child was being diagnosed by the psychiatrist. My child is non-binary, so I know you're familiar with all of that. Using they, them pronouns. So when I refer to my child, Will, but anyway, Will was in, I think, 8th grade at the time. And the psychiatrist, and Will insisted that they be evaluated for ADHD. And I said, you don't have ADHD. You've been reading since you were 3 years old, because I couldn't sit still to read and I had never been diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And so sure enough, as is the case for a lot of people, we go into the psychiatrist's office and I'm answering more yeses for me than for Will. Because not only did Will have inattentive presentation of ADHD, but I am combined type, which means that I am hyperactive, explaining why I couldn't sit still to read, and inattentive, but nobody caught it. I didn't do anything with this information, by the way. At the time, I'm an entrepreneur. I graduated college with high honors. I started my business. I'm going through a divorce, which, by the way, is going to come back up in our conversation. But it wasn't until I realized that my mom had ADHD that this whole thing happened, because I don't think I would have ever even explored ADHD and its impact, because I'm thinking I'm doing just great. And then, of course, I realized my mom had it. And then I immediately thought I have to start a podcast. And the name was literally divinely inspired. And I also had 2 grandmothers with ADHD. One of them I knew, and my grandmother, the other one who was my father's mother, and now I clearly know she had it. She was an entrepreneur and lots of emotional dysregulation based on what I can tell, and family patterns. But I was actually doing an interview with my cousin, who's a marriage and family therapist, and she has ADHD. And she's like, Jamie, your grandma had ADHD. And I was like, wait, what? So we share that. And my grandmother, by the way, was my all-time favorite person. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry she passed, but
thank you.
I'm envious. My grandma died at 78.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. She was around to read my book, had like a little bit of the early signs of dementia, but she at least remembered it and would say, like, basically everybody needs this to like solve their problems, and was just wonderful. And I did a lot of video interviews, as she got a little bit older, about like her wisdom. And it sounds like you also had these amazing grandmas and your own story that I think is so important, that there's some hard stuff with ADHD, but there's also so much beauty and inspiration. And, when I talk to family members and other people, like at her memorial, she just inspired everybody, like doing the conversion van and going through all of the national parks, before like social media or anything, and traveling around the world and doing all these things that like just, I think, opened doors for people, her curiosity, her drive, all of those things. And I think it's when you have people in your life that live life well and probably struggle with some things that never have made sense to them, it's really important, because then you also see all the good stuff. And I think it's so hard when people have grown up with less ADHD families, like everybody has ADHD, and so they felt different and they've gotten all this feedback, and then they have all this internalized shame that carries into all these aspects in their life. So I love the fact that you have 2 ADHD grandmas. That's so special.
Yeah, and 2 ADHD parents. So you know what I actually love about what I'm trying to do, and who I'm targeting, is those women 45, 50 and over who weren't diagnosed, who are discovering that they have ADHD, because it is also my work as a senior move manager and certified senior advisor, that seniors they're not given, or older adults are not given, the attention that they deserve. They're not giving the respect that they deserve. And we sort of brush them aside, just like a lot of people with ADHD are sort of like tossed aside. And so for me, I'm like, okay, once you discover that you have it, then the reality is you probably do have grandchildren that are going to have it. So let's model resiliency for them, and let's model, what aging curiously looks like, and what aging, I hate to use the term graceful, but I mean, I don't like the word anti-aging, because we should want to age, but there's got to be like powerful aging, and how we show up in our own lives is an example for our families and the legacy that we leave. So your grandmother clearly did. And I saw the big smile that went on Anita's face. That's awesome. I know there's nothing like the love of a grandma.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the other thing too, of like, sometimes you can have, when you realize that you have ADHD later in life, it might question of the things of how you were as a parent, especially for moms, because like there's so much pressure to be this mythical perfect person with all these executive functioning skills or whatever, grandma, and you're missing out on the beauty that your kids get and your grandchildren get when you love them intensely, when they're your special interest, and like
Oh,
all
sure.
the, like that is like one of the most beautiful gifts that you can ever give. And I think that's, like you said, like, kind of aging gracefully, or also like making sure that you're remembering all the good stuff that you have, even with the challenging stuff, with like doctor's appointments and all the things and all the stuff that kind of catches up a little midlife and later on in life that are really tricky when you have ADHD amplified by menopause and other things that impact ADHD. So it is a tricky journey. And the relationships that you have are what keeps you going, and are your resource to outsourcing a lot of those hard things like doctor's appointments or advocating for yourself. And so, yeah, get your ADHD adult grandchildren or adult children to help you. And it is a force to be reckoned with, for sure.
I love that. And that's how my mom used to describe me. So I always like to ask people, how did you discover your ADHD and how did you get into the career that you're in?
Let's see here. I probably had heard that I had ADHD. Both my brothers were diagnosed. I wasn't, but and I am probably more hyperactive than them. At least like my full brother, maybe not my half brother, but he is definitely hyperactive as well. So kind of stereotypical, like we all knew that like the boys had it in our family. but when I was in grad school, I think I was like in a diagnostic class and I was like, okay, well, I obviously have it. And then I went and got a formal diagnosis, all those things, and kind of processed like, oh, well, this kind of makes sense of why this happens in there. And kind of went about my way until I became a mom, and the ADHD symptoms and becoming a mom and all these tools that I didn't even realize I was using, impacted my executive functions and my systems and all those things. And then I kind of did a deeper dive, and I had already, my career was already in couples counseling. I love relationships. I would say, my grandparents' relationship is like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It turns out there's ADHD in his family. So I think it's kind of this, what I've seen a lot of the time, and I will say in my relationship as well, like the non-ADHD partner that grows up with ADHDers that loves them and does all these things seems to have a very nice balance of like knowing kind of how you coexist, or kind of that language that you speak and the supports and the gentleness. And I mean, I just think my grandparents had such a beautiful relationship, and I love my relationship that I have realized is kind of modeled off of them. And I just think there's so much power in healing. And so like that was my thing of couples counseling. I already knew I had ADHD, but like I probably was already doing things that were more ADHD affirming. But when I became a mom, I was like, okay, I need some more tools. And so I started, when I was doing my trainings in couples counseling, I would also like sneak out and do some ADHD ones. And so that kind of combination of, being with Sue Johnson, who does emotionally focused therapy, and like seeing all these things and her, skits of like, okay, explain the impact of not doing the dishes and all these things. And I'm like, well, that's going to make the ADHDer feel worse. And this doesn't really work. So it kind of just made those like kind of two worlds connect in a way that it's like, okay, let's start assessing when I am in couples counseling. Cause it's like most people either got diagnosed because their kid gets diagnosed, or there's problems in the relationship that keep on coming up. And so they end up in therapy because like, kind of like when the kids are a little older and there's more space for that. And there's kind of all these unresolved issues or complaints that, Gottman will call perpetual problems that never seem to go away. So I would see a lot of them before, 2020, and just brought that kind of like wisdom that I had, and then my own knowledge of ADHD, and kind of tweaking a lot of those things until I found a real good flow for what I do now. And then of course the book and all that stuff.
I love it. And I have to tell you that it's been my, one of my hyper focuses has also been on relationships. I was married for 15 years, and definitely, and did not know I had ADHD at the time. And now I understand so much of why my marriage didn't work. Not to blame it all on ADHD, because that is absolutely not the only reason, but it definitely would have been helpful to understand the ADHD when I was married. And then when I was divorced, when you go through a divorce, you have a lot of time to look at yourself and look at, why you're, if, hopefully, and especially with your ADHD, you're very curious. Why did it break down? What was my part in it? So emotional focus therapy, that's the Hold Me Tight book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, read that one. I read Gottman's the four great, I can't remember that, Four Horsemen, or I read Attachment, the different attachment theories. So I am so like fangirling over here with you and all that you've done. And I want to ask you a question and would love to hear how you respond to it. But I think one of the reasons that people with ADHD struggle in relationships, and this is what I learned from the attachment theory stuff, is that if you grow up with an insecure attachment, then that's what's comfortable for you. And you will go out continuing to seek that because it's a pattern, or trying to fix it, like the Imago. And I did Imago as well. And so I think that what happened, especially in my situation, is that I come from a long line of divorce. Everybody was emotionally dysregulated. So you have generation after generation of, emotional dysregulation, then raising children. And then that's what So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yes. I have so many thoughts on it. I keep on telling Tamara to write another book with like the extended family instead of the you, me, and our ADHD family. Because I don't want to write another book. I do have a second one coming out, and I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm done. But so this is the thing, is that like ADHD families come in all shapes and sizes, but because of the high comorbidity rates, which is kind of like and it comes with extra diagnoses, extra challenges, because most people who are older, the diagnosis didn't exist. And even what we had like 20 years ago, like what my brothers got was like medicine and nothing else. And that's not really what you need. I mean, it's a part of it, but it's not the whole story.
Absolutely.
You're talking about like a lot of like high rates of also using substances like alcohol to like emotionally regulate and, like running on stress, to turn your brain on. There's a lot of like high rates of anxiety and depression. There's a great graph on the CDC website, or at least it used to be there, that show how many like co-occurring diagnoses there are. So I think you also have to come thinking of it as like, a lot of times your families have a history of trauma or a history of like, let's just say alcoholism. And that creates a lot of that insecurity of either trying to find somebody to fix, or that instability in relationships, or the emotional volatility that you do get attracted to. That does make it sometimes hard in relationships. Like I always say ADHD relationships, they work the hardest because they love so hard and they fight so hard, like to be together, but they tend to use the wrong tools that can drive people apart. But then also when you're coming from like some of those trauma histories, right, then you can also fight really, really harshly in the way that like that was given to you or that you witnessed. And it's something that you don't want. Most people have a lot of shame with, but especially when you have like two ADHDers in a relationship, that definitely can come up. So I think just because you have ADHD and you come from ADHD family does not mean that you have insecure attachment, but there is a likelihood of that. And I think like looking at my family, that extended family that has like tons of ADHD all over the place, you have people who are really successful and live really great lives. And then you have other people who have struggled with addictions or have struggled with the law, or, in some of those ways of seeing like kind of how it does play out. And then also too, like as you get older and you're maybe taking care of your aging parents or dealing with their estates with no will or paperwork or organization and tons of stuff to go through, like you're kind of like, you carry stuff from your past. And so I don't know if that really answered your question, because I went all the way out here in the systems and the environments. But I think like, it does depend on where you come from. That does impact, like the type of relationship you have. And also for older generations, a lot of the stuff that you received of what a relationship should be or what you should need also works against your ADHD. When I see older couples, part of the work is like, if you've read my book, praise is one of the pillars, because often what we need for dopamine, we get from our partner, we get from our relationships, of that praise and that like excitement. And what can really make it easier to clean a house is somebody being excited and not just pointing out by like, oh, well, you missed this one thing, and those celebrations. But so many times that generation is like, oh, you shouldn't need that. You shouldn't need praise. You shouldn't need to, this should be easy. And so all those shoulds get in the way of actually using a lot of ADHD tools. And that also comes up in your relationships, especially if your partner's also from that generation too, that like it's harder for them to understand if you're super curious and learning about your ADHD and, oh my goodness, this would be this and this and this and this. And they're like, no, I shouldn't have to do that. And I'm just like, there's a lot of unlearning that has to take place before you can learn the tools and also feel safe in your relationships,
Sure. Yeah.
which is what we're talking about.
I wanted to share something about my childhood and my history that I think is relevant to relationships, and then I want to kind of get some problem solving from you. So I actually, again, didn't know that my mom had ADHD until about 2 years ago, and looking back now, realized that she was parenting me from an emotionally dysregulated place, and we were fighting all the time. And I realized now it's because she was so sensitive. And there's like nothing that I could say that didn't set her off. And then she also, because we tend to process out loud, she was processing as a single mom, when I'm 3 and 4 years old, and she's just putting this heavy stuff on me. So I'm feeling as a child, this, the burden of like caring for my mother, even at a very young age. And so we did have a strained relationship. And so I also do think that the reason that we have relationship issues when there is ADHD, whether it's a partner relationship or a familial relationship, it is that emotional dysregulation. And it was when I realized that we were both coming into that relationship emotionally dysregulated, that we sort of like, wait a minute, is this what's really happening, or am I making this up? So, okay. So here's my big question. And that is, okay, we have 2 ADHD partners. I think what would you say the percentage of just the typical population of people who will seek marital therapy? Like, and I'm not talking about ADHD. I'm just talking about general population in the US.
Ooh, I don't know off the top of my head. I will say younger generations are way more like, hey, therapy's cool. Let's come. Let's do premarital counseling. Let's just do counseling even when we're in college. And so you see a difference with that. But I also have seen an uptick on like, people who are retired and, that are coming into my ADHD and US course, like sometimes repeatedly because they like it so much and they need that structure. And they're finally figuring out how to stay emotionally regulated, because it's not like the big things that get in the way. It's like the RSD like reaction where you feel like somebody's rejecting you, or like, and so I definitely see, I think, especially with, kind of COVID and then the increase of knowledge around ADHD, I do see a huge uptick across the board where I felt like before I was shouting into the void about what was going on. So I don't know off the top of my head, but I will say there's a lot more people who are coming more in with the prevention part, which like makes my heart so happy. Whereas before, a lot more of this awareness and articles and stuff started coming out. It was really when people for couples counseling, it was when things felt really, really bad. So we had to work really, really hard. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I do think there's a pretty good percentage of at least probably like 40 and under that feel very comfortable and don't have like the stigma of like, oh, if we need help in our relationship, that means it's wrong or it's bad. Like I think there's like that older, kind of like resistance to it, because it feels like it's only for like really, really somebody who needs it that much, or there's something wrong with you, and that feels scary versus it feeling a lot more accessible. Because I think, my parents got divorced too, partly because of the ADHD and probably autism in there, but which is also why my grandparents were so rock solid in our lives, of that community part to keep those dysregulated people, not dumping it on us. But I think, what they did, at least being a child of the 80s, all of us who came from divorced families, we were all put in therapy. So we all have we don't have such an association with it because it was just like, yeah, you go to school, you go to therapy, you talk about your feelings, you play with some dolls, whatever it is, that
Yeah.
type of thing. So I think there is a big, probably demographic input of how many people or percentage of relationships go to therapy.
I would agree with you 100% that we are definitely, thankfully, we are destigmatizing therapy. We're destigmatizing mental health. I mean, slowly, because I remember my grandfather refused to even discuss the fact that my mother was in therapy. And he would never have gone. And by the way, he probably had ADHD as well. Definitely was diagnosed dysthymic. But I do want to say what RSD is for anybody who might be listening for the first time. You and I know it. It's called rejection sensitivity or rejection sensitive dysphoria. When I went through coaching, one of the coaches said he doesn't like the word dysphoria, but I will say that when you have ADHD, you tend to be more sensitive to rejection than other people. And I also want to always put that disclaimer that if you meet one person with ADHD, how many people have you met, Anita?
I mean, my whole life is full of ADHDers.
I mean, the expression is if you meet one person with ADHD, you meet one person.
One person with ADHD. Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, mine too. I mean, I'm realizing, by the way, trailing it back, like all of my best friends, since I actually saw my middle school best friend when I went home to Florida last week. And of course, once I learned about ADHD, I'm like, oh, she clearly had it. And so, of course, I was the one to say, you know what? I bet you have. And by the way, she already has had one child diagnosed and the second was on their way to diagnosis. But we do tend to surround ourselves because we understand each other's energy and we can skip from conversation discomfort. There's so many reasons. But the other thing that I wanted to say about the rejection sensitivity, and I am definitely, this is probably one of the biggest challenges in my relationship is that, and I love Brene Brown because she has a story that she says that when she was describing something with her husband and there was a problem, and she said to him, the story I'm telling myself is, and so prior to understanding my ADHD, I would have ruminated about something that my fiance did, or I would have turned it over a billion times and made it something that it really wasn't. But now I'm aware of the fact that I'm oversensitive. And then I will say, hey, this is what I'm saying to myself. What's really going on? I think that's been super helpful.
Oh, that is for sure. And I have a whole ADHD communication tool that's designed for RSD, which I also really like. Dotson's kind of opposite part of it. Also, yes, our nervous systems are wired differently. Also, there's some really cool research studies out there too of kind of talking about positive versus critical parenting and how that also impacts your nervous system, including your parasympathetic one that comes on to help you regulate. But I have that in my book of that thing, the story I tell myself, because the thing is that we do misinterpret information. And in my book that will come out this fall on ADHD and motherhood, there's a whole bunch of parts about emotions and how your brain can trick you. And I think that's one of the coolest things about being a parent and seeing my kid of being able to help kind of determine of our feelings are valid, our experiences are valid, and the way that our nervous systems are wired, it's hard for us. And we want to make sure that we're making choices, because this is why I see in a lot of ADHD relationships, if you've been rejected a lot or had a lot of relational ruptures, because you do tend, ADHDers have a higher percentage of struggling with friendships and other things in childhood that carry into your primary relationship, right? A lot of times what happens is if we feel rejected, then we reject the other person and push them away when all we want is closeness. Right. And so it's just kind of this really hard cycle to get out of if that's all you've known is this person's unhappy with me or disappointed in me. And there's definitely tools, I want to say, for that emotional regulation piece. There's a lot of parts of our sensory systems that are different that also can really help with regulation and getting accurate information. But it's just something that you have to know, I definitely struggle with that as well. And also being any place of being an author or anytime you can get feedback, it's I have to hype myself up. And I have my team of ADHD colleagues that are so good. And we all support each other of kind of giving kind of like the extra cushioning that we need. And I think in our relationships of how do we have like the lead in, that's what Gottman will call a soft start, but it's really for ADHD, like the RSD recognition of, I know that you're trying hard, like I see, like whatever it is that are your core fears, which are normally like fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, all of those things, those starts that somebody can hold that space can rewire your nervous system. So RSD, or that fear or feeling of rejection or criticized when it might not even be there, or just getting real feedback that you actually want, but it feels so overwhelming you can't handle it, and then your relationship doesn't get the feedback it needs to grow and change, which is a beautiful thing. So I think there's like, it's RSD is hard, but also there's tools and other ways to kind of like know that you have it and work through it versus letting it be the driver and telling you what decisions to make that are based on things that are probably not true, if that makes sense. But I also want to say that I think ADHDers are some of the most empathetic, kind human people, also social justice warriors, because we know what it feels like to be misunderstood or for information to feel really bad. And I also think that most ADHDers do come with this other part of this beauty that has been developed because of it. Mm-hmm. And also the same thing, that recognition. What did he say? Recognition, sensitivity.
Euphoria. Recognition, euphoria.
Yeah, that Dotson said. Sorry, I definitely did the ADHD circle around to 10 points. But it also is really true in knowing that, like I would say, like knowing my praise needs and knowing, say, like even with my spouse of like, some extra love today, like versus like getting it in a weird way of just being able to be like, oh yes, shower me, adore me, all these things. Sets me up so that way my tank is full and I'm less sensitive to the other things. And I think the more tools, the ADHD relationship tools, the more safe and secure you feel, that makes it safer to say what you're saying. It's like, oh, hey, the story I'm telling myself is that you think I'm a horrible person and a bad mom and this because we ran out of milk. And so obviously when you breathed funny, you were telling me that I am horrible and you hate me. Is that accurate? And then they get this story to be like, no, that had nothing to do with you. Like I stubbed my toe, whatever it is.
Right. My kids would be like, you hate me and you want me to die. And I'm like, whoa, back it up. Like, oh, by the way, all three of my children have ADHD. So, okay. So you touched on, and we may need to have a separate conversation on the rejection sensitivity, because I will tell you that even though I'm an ADHD coach, it is absolutely still my biggest pain point. It's like the one thing that I can't seem to, like, I figured out how to deal with my time blindness, and I'm figured out how to deal with the fact that I can't remember anything, but the rejection sensitivity, that is my Achilles heel. That is the thing that stops me. And I'm not a perfectionist, but I don't like when anybody criticizes me. It is, mm-hmm. And especially if it's a loved one, that's even more painful. So I'm going to invite you now that you have to come back. Because I have two things that I want to do when we take a pause. And one is, I always ask my guests if they could press that ADHD button. If you were at conference in 2024 and you heard Penn Holderness give his keynote speech, and he said if he could press a button and not have ADHD, would he press that button? So I love to ask my guests that question. But I also want, when we come back, for you to share your best pieces of a relationship advice for people who have ADHD. Like, what would be the most important nuggets that they can walk away with, if that's okay?
That's good. Can I totally just say this one thing of the advice my grandma gave that I think is very helpful for RSD is that growing up, when like I was in dance or any of those things, and I totally did like RSD kid things I didn't even know was that, but she would always tell me, hey, they see potential in you if they're giving you feedback. There is like this investment part, and growing up with that in my book, it's really about the growth mindset. But I think that's the other part of like, if you matter, someone's going to share something with you. And that I think worked for her, because she was like I said, a pioneer. She was like a super feminist, did all the things that women from her generation were not allowed to do, like breaking all the rules. And I wish I had more of the Teflon that she seemed to have. But I think she also carried that and instilled it in us and other people. And I think that helped. It doesn't take away from RSD, but it also helps that like core memory of like, if your spouse is talking to you, or if there's, and I mean, sometimes it's like if it's somebody on the internet, it's stranger, there's no relationship there. But if you have a relationship with somebody, that takes a lot, and they're caring and they're wanting it and they're wanting your attention or they're wanting something from you. And that's like a beautiful thing that I think a lot of people didn't get as kind of a baseline in relationships. So I don't know, just because of the,
no, that's really good. Wow, your grandmother, she was a forward thinker and amazing. Okay, so we're going to take a pause. Before we take a pause, though, I always like to put a plug in because this is self-funded. This is a labor of love, but I do have a paycheck to earn and a dog to feed treats to, because that is how I keep Benji from barking when I am doing a podcast. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about Silver Linings Transitions when you listen to this break, and about the new Sparkler Society, which, by the way, Anita, what I decided to do, because I have this area of interest with older adults, we're creating a community of older adults discovering that they have ADHD, and putting a community in place for them that supports what their needs are. We have one chat that's called the Worry Circle. You know, why worry by yourself when you can come online? And another one is a craft swap. You find a lot of people with ADHD like to do a lot of crafts, or they think they're going to do the craft, and then the craft, I see the head nod. So let's trade that, because we also have that strong sense of social justice. We don't want to put that into the landfill. We want to know that it's going to be well used. So you're going to hear a little bit about that. But also, if you're listening to this podcast, the only way I'm going to be able to build awareness that ADHD doesn't, go away once you are, 20, 30, whatever, but it continues throughout life, is for you to share this podcast and like it and rate it so that other people see it. So those are my words from the sponsor. And then we're going to take a quick pause and come back with Anita Robertson. And I used to dread visiting my mother. Because of the clutter, the piles, the chaos, we all experience clutter differently. For me, it was a source of anxiety and stress. I'd try to help and she'd get defensive. We were both frustrated, and it was destroying our relationship. Then we discovered something that changed everything. My mother had ADHD, and she'd been living with it undiagnosed for over 76 years. Suddenly, it all made sense. The clutter wasn't laziness. The disorganization wasn't a choice. Her brain was wired differently, and no amount of willpower or traditional organizing advice was ever going to work. That discovery became my life's work. It's why I started the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. It's why I became an ADHD coach and specialist. And it's why I am so passionate about helping women like my mother and maybe like you. Because here's what I know. Clutter affects us emotionally and physically. It damages relationships, it creates shame spirals, and the overwhelm of not knowing where to start keeps you frozen. But it's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's brave. If you're in the San Diego or Coachella Valley area, my team at Silver Linings Transitions can come to your home. We'll help you tackle the clutter with compassion, not judgment. I also work with women virtually through one-on-one ADHD coaching. And if you are overwhelmed with clutter, I can connect you with trusted resources in your area. Visit jamieshapiro.me to get started, or grab my book, This Explains So Much, on Amazon. My mother and I got our relationship back. You can get your peace back too. That's JAMISHAPIRO.me. And we are back with Anita Robertson, a licensed clinical social worker and author. And what is your first book, and what's your new book called, Anita?
So my first book is ADHD and Us, A Couple's Guide to Loving and Living with Adult ADHD. So that's all focused on ADHD relationships. And then my second book that's coming out is called, well, they're still working on the title, but it's going to be Being a Mom with ADHD, something like that. Because it's tricky with the title because you can be an ADHD mom and people will think the mom has ADHD or you have an ADHD kid, but you don't have ADHD. So the title has been a little tricky,
Well, but it's both usually, right? Yes. And,
yes.
you know what? I'm really glad you're doing that. I have to tell you that I, realized I raised all three of my children before I knew that I had ADHD. And I felt like I could never get it together. And I remember like, all these people who are doing the sticker charts, and I would miss parent teacher conferences. And, and I do believe, and I've said this on my podcast, that I think that having ADHD is much harder for women than it is for men. If you are raising children as head nods, if you're raising children, because women are the executive functioning of the household. So, when it's just you could probably cobble it together and do what you need to do. But when you're responsible for little humans and yourself and your home, I think that's where, it falls on our shoulders. So I'm so glad that you are addressing that audience. And I'm happy offline to give you some of my wonderful ADHD ideas on that. Yes. So, okay. The button question, Anita. If you never had it, would never have it, it's gone, poof, would you press that easy button?
I would not. I mean, honestly, I will say I have not actually experienced a lot of neurotypical worlds. I go in there and I'm like, oh, this is weird. I really love like the neurodiversity part. I think that part of that curiosity and loving and just being curious about people has like benefited my life. And all my favorite people have ADHD. My favorite, grandma, just, all of those things. So I think for me, like that is like the other stuff, sure, would I change? But like that wouldn't even be an option. But I also want to emphasize that that's also because I'm coming from such wonderful, positive ADHD environments that a lot of people didn't get to grow up in. And I think that's a really, really big part and kind of leads into the second button question.
Mm-hmm. Which is, what's the second button question?
Wasn't it like, what advice would you give for ADHD relationships?
Oh, yes. That's a question, but not a button question.
Oh,
But, yeah. No, I'm like, wait, what? Now you've thrown me off because I knew what I was going to ask you, and then I had to like go there with you. But I was going to say this when I ask someone if they have ADHD, because actually I got this at conference this year. It's a sticker on my water bottle that says, "Keep talking, I'm diagnosing you." So I always start with, by the way, the biggest compliment that I can give you is to ask you if you have ADHD, because to your point, my favorite people, my best conversations, I mean, there is a magnetism about people, especially, okay, well, when they're doing the thing that they're here to do, or that their hyper focus is, and they light up, it's just like stand out of the way and watch them. Now, you ask me to do math or something technical, I'm going to like start stuttering and turn, all crazy and whatever, because it's not what I'm good at. But find an ADHD person in their zone of genius, and it's like a sparkle. It is.
Also, great wisdom, friendship wisdom my grandma gave me is just like, those are the people that are interesting. Like, follow your interests. Don't be like everybody else. Yeah. And like, those basic kid years, like you might not be that, but it does make you a very interesting person. And I do find that too. It's like, and I get excited when somebody else is excited. So anyways, like, I definitely agree with you. It is captivating and amazing and so fascinating to hear somebody's special interests and how that works and how they contribute to the world in such a beautiful way.
Right. Oh, I love it. Okay. So now the relationship advice, and I definitely have to have you, because we're not going to have enough, because I try to like keep these half an hour ish, because I recognize who my audience is and I don't want to bore them. But what would be for someone that's listening, what's your best relationship advice for somebody who, has ADHD or strongly suspects they have ADHD, and they're in a relationship?
Yeah. So I would say kind of like my two biggest pieces of advice is, to learn and love yourself. at this moment, because a lot of ADHDers are like, oh, if I just do this one thing, then I'll be like perfect and normal and all those things. And that leads into the second part of making your environment work for you. And that's also with your relationships. And so, whether it's like asking others to support you or letting them know, hey, this is how my brain works. Here, read this book about it, or like making sure that you're not doing all the work is really important. And the problem is that like when you have some of these things, it feels so scary to not be like everybody else, or you feel different, then it's really hard to use the tools that work for you and like accept all the other beautiful things, which is why I love hearing about your groups and probably will refer some people to them, because I think when you're around people in ADHD environments, a lot of ADHDers, it takes that away. And all of a sudden it opens up all these worlds. I mean, I did Peace Corps a long time ago, like 25
Wow.
years ago. Yeah, we're coming up on our like, I don't know, 20-year anniversary of like graduation or whatever. And that's where I found all my people. We didn't know we all had ADHD at the time. Some of us came in diagnosed, but like kind of the overachieving social justice, like we want to make the world a better place and we don't know how.
Perfect.
People, like they all read my book and they're like, oh, this explains so much. I have ADHD. I was like, oh yeah, I've just kind of assumed we all figured that out by now. But it's like, where you find your people and that you feel accepted helps you accept yourself. And ideally that's with your person, but also that allows in it, but it doesn't have to be, but that allows you to the safety and the freedom to advocate for yourself, to do things different in a way that works for you, to explore without judgment. And I think, and then just realizing that there are environments that set you up for failure and set you up for success, and understanding what those are. So you seek those out and make your home and your relationship work with your brain. And it's so much easier because you've been working so hard. And so you just put 10% of that into the stuff that works. And it's like so beautiful to see.
Yeah, I love it. First of all, I have to tell you the title of my book is called This Explains So Much.
Nice. I like it.
Once it hits, you're like, whoa. But I agree with you. Like I had another podcast that I did. I think it was Dr. Eliza Barash, and she said, don't do life on hard mode. And that has been my motto. And really like, okay, I can take the people pleasing path. That's not going to be easy for me. Right. Or I can do what's going to make my life easier. And then I'm going to be a happier person. Right. So I like that you said that. This was great. And speaking of doing what you're good at, I actually am probably going to have to close down the podcast because I have not had someone clean my house in years. And recently my fiance and I decided that it was going to be worth the investment for our harmony in our home to have someone that comes in and helps. Otherwise it just keeps piling up. And anyway, I definitely think, and I wrote a whole article that'll be coming out at some point in Attitude Magazine about clutter and what do you do when you have different clutter tolerance levels and how do you make that work. But only to say that I think I was sharing with you that normally they come in the morning when I don't record the podcast, but they had to come this afternoon. And so now I'm hearing that. And I keep it very real, Anita. Like this podcast is just, I don't do life on hard mode. So I'm like, I slowly hear them creeping down the stairs. I'm like, oh, I better start to tell people when they hear noise. That's what it is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think house cleaners are fantastic and highly recommend, unless your special interest and hyper focus is cleaning and organizing, which I wish that was one of mine. It is not
I do clean when I'm stressed. I will. I like to feel like I've been productive about something. But then it keeps me from doing all the other things that I need to do. I love Tracy Otsuka calls it procrastinating.
Yes.
Just like I'd rather clean than do what I actually have to do. So anyway, any parting advice or words of wisdom to our listeners today? Again, how can they find you?
Yes. So my name, AnitaRobertson.com. I have lots of free resources. There's also some stuff for kind of that midlife sandwich if you're taking care of your aging parents and things that are really helpful also with grief for the people there. So I do definitely have a lot of free resources. Also highly recommend cleaners, but cleaners that work with ADHDers, not the ones that are like, oh, if you have stuff on the floor, I can't clean. Like, oh, that's like that's going to be a lot more challenging than like the cleaner I used to have, and totally wrote like love letters to her during the beginning stage of the pandemic. So I was like, I miss you so much. You're the most like wonderful thing in our lives, she was just so amazing. But anyways, I have a course, like my ADHD and Us course, that follows the book, that also has live sessions where you practice the tools. You learn the ADHD communication tool that I designed. That's coming up in the beginning of March. And then, of course, I'm always at the conferences, whether it's the ADHD ones. I'll be at neurodiversion. And then I have trainings that I do throughout, more for clinicians. But thanks for having me. And I hope you continue to do the podcast, or find a way that your environment and the podcast work for you. But
and normally it's not a problem. It's just, it happens to be today. So.
Well, I couldn't hear anything. And also I have new cleaners coming in today because we just moved. And so I was hearing the vacuum at the beginning, and they've left. But, it's that sound discrimination. It can be hard to concentrate when you hear something and you're also being present. So I hear you on that. But I was in the same boat as you.
I want to share with you, by the way, just an aside, for anybody that you work with, I don't know if you're familiar with the Institute for Challenging Disorganization.
I don't know if I've heard of that, but I also have no working memory, so I could have and forgot.
So it's organizers who have an understanding of ADHD. So you can find an ADHD specialist within the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. It's ICD. So that I'm a member of that, but I'm also a member, you're going to be like really sad you didn't know this, of NASM. That's the National Association of Senior and Specialty Move Managers.org. And we literally go in, we help everybody pack all of their stuff, figure out what they're going to take with them. And then we unpack it, put it away, organize, decorate, make the beds, do all of that stuff. And people don't even know that this exists. So I'm just putting that out there. So anybody, So.
It is good. I always say, like, look for like an organizer to help with like that knows ADHD. And I need to get this information from you so that way I can put it in some of my references, resources.
And I would also love to have you. So in the Sparkler Society, that is this membership platform that we are opening in February. We're giving everybody a free month to try it and see how it works for them. But we're going to be bringing in experts in different areas for different presentations. And I would love to have you come back and talk to our community once we're up and running too.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, because in true ADHD fashion, like I have so many other interests that have happened, around ADHD outside of relationships as well.
Oh, for sure. And I would definitely love to have you come back and talk about rejection sensitivity. I mean, even if it's a lesson just for me that everybody gets to hear, because whoa. Anyway, I'm so grateful that you came onto the podcast and that we were able to make it work between all the other distractions. And I'm also very sincere in my effort to help you as you're helping moms, because I totally get that. I parented without knowing that I had ADHD until my oldest child was diagnosed at 14. And then I didn't pay any attention to what that even meant until 2 years ago. So by then I only had one child left in the house. So.
But there's also like a lot of times people, especially in the USA, are parenting on survival mode. So there's no space to actually learn or get support because you're focused on your kids,
That is true. I was on survival mode. And so I did have that pause to take a break and to learn and then when I got divorced and I actually had time when I didn't have my children, that's when I started to do all the Gottman and all the other stuff.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And I would love to be back on and, keep hearing about your amazing adventures, because it does sound fantastic and fun and all the great stuff that ADHD brings.
Thank you. And I am committed, and that's what this podcast is about, is really helping anyone who discovers that they have ADHD to make the rest of their life the best of their life. And that's always a great way to end the podcast. Thanks so much, Anita.
Love that. Thank you.
Thanks. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.